Zakukała, kukułeczka, zaborem, zapakała pana młoda za stołem, diri daj daj, 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 diri daj 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 daj. I mean, I don't know how actors manage to be in the moment and follow a script.
I always find that difficult.
Yeah.
I have real awe for anybody who can really
Yeah.
do that.
But actually, do you know, when an actor gets great, they start being allowed to improvise and also to devise their own scripts. I mean,
actually,
like what's her name? Dame Judi Dench. She always changes a script. She always improvises it, and she always comes out top.
yeah.
You know, she's been in it long enough to know that.
Well, we're filming now anyway, so we might as well start our interview. Hi,
yes.
My name's Noah Murray. I'm the director of The Girl Who Fell Through the World, and this is Sef. Sef's just filmed episode 5, episode 5.
Yes.
We're just going to talk, so if you move your chair up a wee bit.
Okay.
We'll just, if you frame we'll just carry on.
Yes.
So we were just talking about, acting, improvisation versus learning script.
Ah, yes.
So go on. It's all in camera anyway because she's going to keep it. But
yeah, the thing is that if you've got a script, you can get very nervous about getting the words right. But I know the story, I don't know the words.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I can be in the moment and I can tell you the story, and this time the words will be like this time like this will be the words. But it's in the moment, just as it comes.
But I was saying, I don't know, it was on the camera. I don't know how much you filmed in it, but just going back in case it wasn't said, there was a great calm about the way that you're quite relaxed in sort of going, and then she fell into the snow, and then you can almost see you go, and the snow was white, and the moon was shining. It was almost like you're exploring it for the first time each time, which is just a different style. It's not that it's better or worse. It's just a really interesting difference in
so you're describing what you're actually seeing. When you're following a script, you're thinking, well, possibly, depending on what type of an actor you are and how far down you are in the business, like Dame Judi Dench,
as you say,
who can change her scripts accordingly. So what you do is you describe what you see rather than thinking, oh, the next words are this. And so there's less of that tension about getting your script right.
And what about that whole thing about storyteller versus actor? Because I've worked with storytellers in the past. One woman was particularly vocal, Australian storyteller, and she was quite adamant that she was never going to work with directors. She just had to do her own thing. And I thought that was a bit...
Well, directors can be difficult for storytellers.
Yeah, of course.
Because, I mean, as you and I worked, I had a story which was my story. Yeah. And then initially you were saying, we could have this in it and this at the beginning. And I was thinking, well, that's restricting me somewhat. But actually it was helpful in the end because it allowed us to place my story in an ongoing story with 4 other tellers. Yeah. So we needed that. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary.
Yeah, yeah.
So we did both.
It was interesting working with you because it was different. Because when we interviewed you, I'm sure you can be as humble as you want, but you're an impressive figure in the sense of like your CV is extremely well versed. You've been all over the world. I can't even get into all the things that you've done. I mean, I know you've been to Korea. You've been to.
South
Poland,
America, Europe,
and you went to
Africa, Sudan, the Middle East.
There he is.
Yeah,
So
Mongolia.
We're going to get to the point where you just name.
I learned overtone singing in Mongolia. I made a BBC radio program about that.
Did you?
Yeah.
About Mongolian singing?
Well, yes. I better not. Well, anyway, I told the BBC that the British Council were going to send me to Mongolia, and I told the British Council that BBC were going to send me to Mongolia, neither of which at the time was true, but they both took it, and I got to go to Mongolia. So there's also a bit of a, as you say in Yiddish, bit of a macha in me, that you make things happen. You've got to.
But okay, let's talk about the beginning. So you tell us how you got, I mean, How did you, I mean, is it getting into storytelling? How did you get into, yeah, where did storytelling come into your life?
Well, I've
Is it
always
storytelling?
been.
Is that the right thing to
Yeah,
call
yeah.
you? Yeah.
No, I've always been a bit of a storyteller, and my family. I mean, all families tell stories about their lives and their ancestors and their families. It's whether you're tuned into that or not. And I was tuned into it because I suppose I'm from a quite a mixed heritage of parents coming and grandparents from all different places. And so the stories were always interesting to me. I mean, my grandfather, for goodness sake, was born in the wild west of Canada in the 1880s, and he really did live in a log cabin. And he emigrated to the UK. My mother loved telling his stories. He was killed, unfortunately, before I was born. And the thing was that she was a storyteller, and I was interested in what she had to say.
She was
And
a
then,
storyteller by trade.
no,
she was
as
just-
a natural.
she was a-
And of course, her mother was from another completely different culture. So I was trying to find out what is my origin, where are my origins? And they seem to come from so many different places. And so I tuned into these different places around the world, thinking, is this where we really come from? And of none of the places, and all of the places, is where we really came from. But it was all about story. And I think that was in me. But then in the 1990s, I started really looking at traditional stories from different countries. And I think part of that was to do with losing my hearing
Yeah,
in
so
an unfortunate incident.
So Rin, he just told me about this before we started filming.
Yeah.
So I said to him, "Do you mind me asking?" Actually, I didn't even ask if I mind asking. I just asked you directly, didn't I? I just said, did you always have your hearing, or did you lose your hearing? And Seth said,
Well, yes, I lost my hearing in an IRA bomb, and so it changed my life. But it took me into the peace process. I worked with the Sustainable Peace Network in Northern Ireland, and I've worked in Israel and Palestine and South Africa.
and part of this process, when you say you worked with him, you told story. You
Well,
started
no,
telling
no, we were sharing stories. So
Sharing stories.
I was telling my story to a person who'd planted bombs for the IRA. He was telling me his story. I was in tears when I heard his story. He was in tears when he heard my story. So that's reconciliation. And it was a very difficult process, I have to say. So we worked intensively with people from all the spectra of communities in Northern Ireland and Britain, because I lost my hearing in Britain. So you're talking with people you would never normally talk to.
Yeah.
And it's tough, and they're finding it tough, and you're finding it tough, and
yeah.
sometimes you argue and quarrel and scream at each other. But then you go into other contexts, like post-apartheid South African communities. You take your experience to them, and they're amazed by your experience. They tell you their experience, and you're amazed by. So it's a process of rehumanizing and finding the human rather than the identity. I'm not just Jewish, I'm human. I'm not just Catholic, I'm human. You're Protestant, well, actually, you're human before you're Palestinian or or a white South African Afrikaner. You find the humanities, the human, I suppose.
It was something we were talking about just before, wasn't it? Just that idea of identity. Because I was talking, a very basic level of the fact that I was 8 years old when I left Northern Ireland. I've got an accent, and everyone claims me as Irish. I moved to Wales, was claimed as Irish. Wasn't really ever really able to identify with the Welsh culture, to the fact that I was always the Irish kid wherever I was. So I've kind of come out, not really, because I speak Welsh. I don't speak it very well anymore, but I used to speak it very well when I was living there, and that was me sort of going, because I remember it was in the middle of a room with a bunch of my girlfriend and a couple of other friends, and they were all speaking English around me, and they went off to speak to some people in Welsh, and I could understand Welsh. I just said, look, why don't you just start speaking Welsh around me, and I'll start learning Welsh, because I just didn't want to be singled out anymore. And that really helped. But yeah, it's just that whole thing about claiming identity, but then also having it pushed upon you,
well,
isn't it?
The thing is, there's two different things. That I tend not to talk about my identity because I have more than one. I have many. But if I say, as I actually happen to be, I'm Jewish, I don't want people to think, oh, he's Jewish, this Jewish, that Jewish, the other. I'm a human before that. So I don't want to be defined by one identity. I don't want to be defined as somebody who's lost their hearing through a bomb, as a victim. I don't want to be defined as necessarily English, but I'm English among other things. I'm all these things, but single identity, and that's a bit what I feel is happening in Britain. I won't even say the United Kingdom at the moment, or England at the moment, we're standing against the EU, and it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. And they even say the British people think we want this to tell the British people. I think the British people? Why do you say the people in this country?
Yeah, yeah.
Because it's also excluding, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And there is always that.
Yeah.
I don't want to get into too much politics on it, but I completely agree. I think there is that idea of being focused in. I mean, there's also connection, because you said you said you got. I mean, I just did it there now with Rin, because she's from Northern Ireland as well. You said I got blown up a bomb, and I was like instantly connected with you because I was from Northern Ireland.
Yes.
And while I've never been anything more than in what was apparently a queue that did have a bomb in the far end, nothing happened to us when we were in Ireland. There's a sort of connection that there's the positive negative of like we're all Brits together, or we're all Irish together, or
Well, exactly.
that idea of kind of unifying and knowing that you've got a place and things. I think that's sometimes where it comes from as well.
No, there is also the sense of feeling at home with a particular community who understand where you're coming from.
Yeah.
And that's what you share when you're with those people. But you don't go around the world telling and excluding yourself by, going on about that separate identity. So it's as you say, negative, positive.
And it's a strange but very big conversation that I think it's worth continuing to have in every world that we're in. I think certainly going on at the minute in a lot of different ways. So let's talk a little bit more about, because when we met online, of course, and we had that audition, and even then we were talking about Polish, Jewish, and you were sort of stopping me a couple of times going, well, Jewish, Polish, that's not really what's important here, what is it? And we sort of went into this nebulous verse at one point where we were like, we're in a winter, well, you didn't even know it was winter then because I sort of brought that in,
yes.
but we're in this town, there's this tailor, there's this story. But I felt like, while there may have been a couple of like getting around a couple of points together, I felt the collaboration was good. I felt we got to a point where Ola was a part of the story and woven in quite well. And of course, I know the whole story in my head. So I know this is the episode before we go in. So I know what I wanted to get out of her within this world. And I knew that when I chose your story, well, at that point we hadn't really chose the story, but I knew I wanted it to be a moment of silence, a moment of like sitting down, because she's running around in a lot of the other story. And she's going through she's going through a war in the episode before you. And then she goes home, so she does go through quite a journey. But so the difference between you and the other storytellers is, to some degree, you're a lot older, so therefore your connection with her is maybe a little bit out. But I was just curious, sort of, what connection you had with her from your perspective. And
well, I mean, I think she's like, when you do get to my age, you look at younger people and you think, oh well, that's how I used to be, and it's sometimes hard to be a young person, so you try and give them a little bit of you wouldn't always criticize what they're doing, you give them a bit of space. And just like when she was sitting there, she didn't want to talk, she just wanted to be warm. So that's the time for me to tell her a story. So that's what happened. So you give younger people a bit of space. And it's just that intergenerational difference.
I suppose that's what's interesting about you, the story, is that you sort of came from that perspective of like an older character who identifies she needs to sit for a minute and I need to talk while she doesn't. So I think that sort of comes across really strong. Whereas in the other pieces, I asked the question, what were you like when you were 10 years old? And do you think you would have got on with Ola at the time? Do you have an answer to that question?
Well, I don't know. Would I've got on?
Where were you?
Yes, I would have got on with Ola, because the fact that she's falling through the world and she's going to all these different places in the Caribbean, in South America, in China, that's exactly where I was at that age. And she's reading and she's looking at documentaries. She's an intelligent young young person.
So you would be, the connection for you is the
Yeah.
fact that you would have been reading at the time.
I
and you
probably would have
yeah.
been a bit like her, yes.
Yeah, because I had a lot of audiobooks when I was a kid. I wasn't a particularly good reader at 10. My kid is reading.
Well, you see,
kid's
we didn't have
old.
audiobooks. We didn't
No,
even
no,
have
yeah.
we didn't even have Walkman or tape recorders that you could carry around.
Yeah, we did
Let
grow
a-
up in that world of audiobooks.
Yeah.
I had a thing called Storytellers, which was like, I think it was about 100 stories over the whole compendium of different books, and you put a tape in and you put it on and it tells you all these tales.
Yeah.
So I have like a quite big imagination from everything from like stories in China to Beauty and the Beast to like really quite scary tales
Yeah.
that we were being subjected to.
Oh,
at a young
tell me
age.
about it. Yeah.
But it was great to be
Yes,
scared. You know?
yes.
And I have a really good relationship with.
Well, this is an issue I have
terror, you know.
today when I work as a storyteller. I grew up with those scary stories. And as a storyteller, you've got to be very careful about. You see, a story is something that it's got a framework, and you can go through some really scary things, but you know you're going to come out of it at the end. And they do say that children who have trauma, they will come out of the trauma much quicker if they've experienced storytelling, story reading, being told stories, than those children who haven't. Because it's like a map of getting into difficulty and coming out of it. But when you don't know stories, you think when you're in the difficulty, it's going to stay there forever. Well, it doesn't. It comes out of it. And I think that's the good thing of being a bit scared in a safe parameter, you know. So.
Yeah, I went to a viewing of a new play a couple of years back, and it was about grief. It was all the adults in the room, all the bookers getting ready to take the play on and take it to their venues, and people were in tears. But now I was in tears a little bit. It was a great experience in the sense of like the narrative. I thought it was very good and the story was really good. But this is for 10-year-olds and younger, and the question around the room was like, "Oh, is this going to be good for them?" But actually, they said we've been doing this for a while, and actually the kids get really positive reactions. They ask questions, they talk about it a lot. So I think, with this piece as well, just really focusing on that idea of not necessarily holding back in some of the other stories as well. Okay, but let's talk a bit about your piece. Let's talk about
so this is a shruti box. I'm going to turn it
So
around.
Sef is going to play this in the piece. So we're just about to record this, and thanks, Ren. And I just thought it'd be really good if he just showed you a bit of the story. Do you want to tell us a little bit about all the pieces first?
Well,
before,
so this is a shruti box which originally comes from India. It was made in India, but this is scaled to a more Western scale, and it was brought over from India by a person who thought that people like me could use this sort of thing. And it's a shruti box, and it sounds like this.
So what are you doing there? Are you tuning it?
Just changing the...
There we go.
So you can change the tone, you see. And it's a traditional Indian instrument that has got a bellows. It works like that. And you'll hear it.
Do you want to do some singing?
Which you will hear in the film.
And what are you singing about?
Well, I mean, that was just vocables, but kukuwechka, about a cuckoo who's knocking on various things, and then there's a girl, well, a young woman, but girl, who is crying. So it's about a cuckoo. It's a very traditional Polish song, and it's got a sort of góralskie tone, which is from the people in the mountains, that they have almost yodel, so that it will carry across from one mountain to another. It's a typical Polish mountain type of singing.
And the piece that we're doing is set in the mountains, isn't it?
It is.
In the snow.
It's set in the snow in villages in the south of Poland, right on the border with Slovakia, and yeah, Podhale it's called, among other things. That's the region. Yeah.
I mean, thank you so much for agreeing to be a part of this and doing it. I think it's been
a pleasure.
I mean, I'm learning lots of different people, but I think
Yeah.
just picking out a new instrument and hearing different ways that people speak and
Yeah.
talk is brilliant. I think all these young people that hopefully will be lots of them will watch this. Then
Well, I hope so.
I think they'll come away and learn a couple of things from everybody. But thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. We're going to do the COVID shake.
Oh yes, of course.